I say highlight this. They're over there. So I'm talking to I'm look I don't know what I'm doing. So Luke, you're there. I've never seen you.
Yeah, last time he was there.
I didn't see him.
Ah,
I can't see him because I'm this way and they're that way. So, oh, that's great. That's beautiful.
Wow. That service with a smile in the center.
I've got your envelopes. He sent me 5 envelopes with bookmarks.
Ah, okay.
So if you didn't get a bookmark or if you want a second bookmark, I brought them. And they're getting better even, more contemplative. So thank you very much. We have a scaled down crowd today. I could tell who's really interested in story time. Let's just put our minds in the right place. At least I have to, because the intention of our getting together like this is to share stories about Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa, but particularly a highlight on Lama Zopa, because none of these stories have been captured in great depth, and they want to cull from the stories of the original students of Lama Yeshe. They want to cull these stories for a book. And the reason why they're concentrating on the original students of Lama Yeshe is because we're expiring.
Very good way of us putting it. I like that. I'm gonna use more often. We're expiring. Yes. Yeah.
But that's actually what's happening. I mean, it is, it's like our use by date. It's finished. So why we still have some brain cells left,
Best Buy. Best Buy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think best by date and use by date. So I was asked to do this, and I really hemmed and hawed around about doing it, and I started to type something, but it's not the same as talking to people and letting the stories just flow. So from my side, I appreciate very much that you're here, and the people online as well. Thank you very much for being here. And hopefully it's helpful to hear about Lama Zopa and Lama Yeshe from the beginning times when they were quite young and we were quite young. In fact, I wanted to give a little update or a little background on the FPMT, which I'm not sure everybody's aware of, but it started. So we all know that the Chinese kindly expelled the Tibetans from Tibet. They invaded their country, so a lot of the Tibetans left and went to India, and they were in basically like concentration camps. They were not in luxury hotels at all, and they were in really hot conditions, which the Tibetans weren't used to. They don't have bugs in Tibet because it's so cold. So they weren't used to bugs, they weren't used to the heat, and they weren't used to the food. And it was a difficult time for the Tibetans to acclimate and get settled in these temporary quarters. And at one point, after the Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa were kind of paired up, because Lama Zopa was a young monk, younger than Lama Yeshe monk. And so that's what they do within the Tibetan tradition is a younger monk will be paired up with an older monk. And particularly in Rinpoche's case, he was recognized as an incarnation of the Laudo Lama. So it was important for Rinpoche, Lama Zopa, to have good training, to have the right education. Because even though somebody can be recognized as an incarnation, that doesn't mean necessarily that they're going to be useful in terms of transmitting the Dharma. Because if they don't have the teachings, if they don't have somebody who can, and they have to be willing, but if they don't have a syllabus to follow and give them the right information, then it's like dead seeds inside that haven't been allowed to germinate. Probably some of us even have mean, I remember when I met the Dharma, it was an aha moment. And I wanted to kind of address that because I had mentioned last time how I had been searching even from the moment of birth, not knowing what I was searching for, but searching for Lama Yeshe, but not knowing who Lama Yeshe was. And when I met the Lamas, it was an aha moment. So somehow the seeds ripened. And that's why we have such a need for what they call universal education, so that children are exposed to the good heart from a very early age, so that these seeds that have got to be there get ripened. So Lama Zopa was hooked up with Lama, it was Geshe Rabten actually, who was a teacher of both Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa, and a highly regarded meditator. Geshe Rabten hooked up Lama Zopa with Lama Yeshe, so Lama Zopa was under Lama Yeshe's care. And they were at the monastery of Domo Geshe Rinpoche. And all of a sudden, one day, there was this Westerner who knocked on the monastery doors and said she was looking for Domo Geshe Rinpoche. Well, Lama Zopa, Domo, as I understand it, means river. And so Rinpoche had been called Domo in his youth because of where he lived. So it was just an accident that they said, oh, you must be looking for Lama Zopa, who had been called Domo. But she wasn't. She was looking for another Lama, but she was hooked up with Lama Zopa. And luckily for us, it was a beautiful arrangement because this lady was named Zina Rashensky. She was a Russian American princess. She was a Russian, she was an American citizen, but she was of Russian ancestry, and she was a princess in Russia. So this woman had apparently enough resources for her to just live independently, and she had had a dream about meeting Domo Geshe Rinpoche. And so that's how she got to the monastery looking for Domo Geshe Rinpoche, but Lama Zopa was the one who she was hooked up with. And she and somebody called Sister Max, Mummy Max, became the real energy behind the lamas, ending up in Nepal, ending up finding this hill called Kopan, where Kopan Monastery was built. And all of you will hopefully be able to go with Keldon next year, so you can see what I'm talking about. You can see the monastery from down below. It's in the foothills of the Himalayas, and you can see it there. And it was run down. Actually, there was nothing really there. They had to build the monastery. There was one like artifact, not artifact. What do you call a building that's old? Not an artifact. It was an archaeological thing. It was there. It was a building that was not in very good shape. Yeah, like ruins. And that became the Inji Gompa, Inji being English Western people. And then the main monastery that they built was for the Tibetans and the children. Do you want to hear this story?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's so unique. That's fine.
Okay. So
She had really good karma.
amazing. Yeah. And please do ask questions because I am conscious of the time. And I thought that we would not talk about a lot today, but I wanted to give you this sort of the oral history of Kopan. You've been to Kopan? Yeah. So Lama Zopa, and you'll get to go with Keldon up to Lama Zopa's hermitage. And I've seen pictures, and in the time that I went, it's like I don't even, I have one monk who sends me videos and photos, and I go, really? This is where you are? You're at Laudo? It's like amazing. But Rinpoche was, in his previous life, it was called the Laudo Lama. And he was at Laudo, lived at Laudo, which is where you'll get to go next year with Keldon. And he was a cave meditator.
That's what I was just thinking about.
Yeah.
I think Venerable Kelvin, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Mention that, yeah.
Yeah. So from a very early age, Lama Zopa, who was identified as, hi, how are you? Great. Welcome. They're going to do prostrations. he was like from 3 years old, he was like crawling out of his cave or crawling up to his cave, that he wanted to go back to his cave, and this mom would have to pick him up and put him back down on the flatter land because the instincts, the seeds were so strong, and he was born basically in the locale where he had died. But when he was an old monk in his cave meditating, his neighbor monk friend who lived in the neighbor cave came to him one day and said, we have to do something about the education system of our children because they live in Nepal, but they're not Nepalese. They're of Tibetan origin, but they live in Nepal. And the education that the Nepalese were providing wasn't the education that was suitable for the Tibetan children. It didn't include anything that of a Buddhist nature. So Lama Zopa said, or the Laudo Lama said, I'm too old. We can't do anything now. Let's do this in our next life. So that's how Rinpoche was hooked up with Lama Yeshe. Zina helped them find this hill, which they purchased, where Kopan was built. And then there was this other building called the Inji Gompa, or the Chenrezig Gompa, because it had a big Chenrezig statue in it. And it was interesting because when I did my year retreat, it was in a room. The first day I arrived in Kopan, they gave me a 1/4-inch mat and told me to sleep in the Inji Gompa on the cement floor. Well, the next morning I said, that's never happening again. And so I ended up living in a place where I made it like Better Homes and Gardens. I upholstered all the furniture and hung curtains. And Lama was just in seventh heaven because the monastery it was not very well developed. So I went from sleeping on the floor to living in a little house, and kind of upgraded the whole area actually by just coming in and making some pillows and putting up curtains like that. But in that area, the Inji Gompa, when I did my year retreat, it was at the Inji Gompa. I had my own little room. And when I went back in 1990 and I left the new Gompa and I walked out of the new Gompa for the Injis, and I looked out over Kathmandu Valley, I said, I know exactly where I am, but I don't know anything about where I am because that building was completely gone. And now there's a beautiful temple in that spot, which you'll see when you go to. So Kelvin's taking everybody to Nepal next year. So put it on your calendar. Do you know Yvonne?
No.
She's an old friend. I don't know how we ever got hooked up, but I've known her for a very long time. And I'm always happy to see you. She has 3 beautiful children who are now grown. Maria's out of college now? No. I mean, that's how long I've known them, when they were just little kids.
He's gonna be a math teacher.
Is he really? Really? Anyway, that's great. Congratulations. So, so just sort of getting back in line there. Does that make sense that the Zina came on the scene, and there was just this situation of coincidences that she got hooked up with Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa, and first she wanted to take them to Indonesia, but they ended up going to Nepal, and a lot of this was consulted with His Holiness, and they ended up in Nepal. They ended up purchasing this property and building Kopan. And then Lama Zopa still had the commitment to the children in Laudo. So what they used to do was the children up at Laudo, they used to stay up there during the winter months. Have it backwards? Yeah, up in the summer months. And then they used to come down to to Kathmandu, to this monastery for the winter months. Yeah. And they were walking, the kids were walking. And you'll see, because you won't be walking. You'll walk a little bit, but you won't be walking the whole distance. But the little children used to do that. And they were under a time pressure, because I remember last time I told you about when I took the helicopter up, there's the monsoon that you have to worry about. So there was a time crunch to get these little children, that's little and big children, down to to Kopan. So what they decided was it really was more expeditious for the Mount Everest Center to relocate, to physically relocate at Kopan Monastery. But Laudo was still there, but the children were down here. And then every so often, Rinpoche would take some back up to Laudo. But now that was Mount Everest Center for Buddhist Studies. And then there was the western side, the Inji side. And what happened eventually after a few years was that they had two courses, spring and fall, and then they settled with one course, and with other courses, little courses going on. But the big course was called the November course, and 200 people just out of the woodwork would show up at this course. And then what happened was this went on for a while, and then people would end up having to go back to the West. And they got back to the West, and people didn't know they were going to die. And so people who had been at Kopan had this new range of thinking. They had this idea that they were going to die. And they had the idea of bodhicitta, and they had an idea of shunyata, but there wasn't anybody that they could talk to, because there wasn't anybody who had had the same kind of training. So these students were highly motivated to start centers. And the very first center was in Australia, Chenrezig. And Tendrin would talk about Chenrezig because she spent a couple of years there. So there was Chenrezig, there was Manjushri in England, and there was Vajrapani in California that you've been to see, right? So that should put that on your bucket list, to go take a course at Vajrapani. And you've been to Land of Medicine Buddha, so you were close. So just to, so this maybe doesn't sound as significant as it was, but these centers, so there were three lamas that were the beginning of Western Buddhism. One was Thubten Kunga from the Nyingma tradition, and he was in San Francisco, and he remained a monk, and he remained in San Francisco. There was another monk called Shambhala, what is it? Chogyam Trungpa. And he was a lay person, and he stayed in America. He didn't travel as much, and he built a facility in Boulder, Colorado. And then there was Lama Yeshe. And Lama Yeshe remained a monk, and he spent 6 months of a year in the East and 6 months of the year in the West. And he was ridiculed by the Tibetans. They called him the hippie Lama, because they didn't have any faith that Westerners could understand or practice the Dharma. And they thought that Lama was wasting his time, their time. Mm-hmm. Lama was wasting his time. It wasn't until, so Lama would be given donations, and he would take it back and give it to the Tibetans. It wasn't until the money started to flow in that they developed an appreciation for what Lama was doing. And Lama and then Rinpoche were they built Kopan Monastery, and they were very instrumental in the development of Sarajay down in South India, which will take people to someday. They'll be on the bucket list. But this is what Lama did, and he didn't ask for donations. It was, and I wanted to let you know that when you finished, we did a really nice thing today. Keldon, and you all know Carly, little Carly. Carly works at a retirement facility, and she asked Keldon to come teach meditation to these people who they're older, and some of them are with walkers, some of them are with wheelchairs, some of them have a multitude of different conditions. So Keldon went and spent an hour with these people, and they were all so happy. I tried to warn them. I didn't know what kind of attention span they would have, and they weren't required to go. It's not like there was a notice, everybody show up for this class. 20 people were there, more than there are here. And my sister afterwards, she said, "Can I make an offering to him?" Okay. And I said, yeah. So, but that's what people do, isn't it? When you get something from somebody that's as precious as the Dharma, that makes your life understandable, that makes you have worthwhile, you want to pay back. It's not something that you have to, I mean, sometimes you have to cultivate, but it's an easy thing for people to offer to the lamas. And so they didn't keep anything for themselves. They invested it in these monasteries and in projects for people who were in compromised situations, like elderly. And they started a project in Bodh Gaya, which we'll go to with Keldon, for lepers. I mean, do we even think of leprosy? It's not on our radar, but there are lepers in India, and it's curable, but nobody puts the time out to cure them. So now they've got this leprosy project, and now they've taken it even further into the education for the children, for their health, the health of the whole community. So it's one particular lady in one lady in particular who's done this, and she should be canonized because she's an Italian lady, lives in Bodh Gaya. You'll see when you get there that it is the poorest state in India. The land is arid, but it's got the Mahabodhi temple. This is where the Buddha reached enlightenment, under the Bodhi tree there. So you'll see all of this with Keldon. Hopefully you can see the leprosy colony and see the work. I mean, my daughter spent quite a time there volunteering because she was so impressed with what Adriana was doing. But this is what the lamas have established over time with the donations that people would give them. So where was I going? So now I wanted to just give a little side story. So there was Thubten Tulku, and he set up a beautiful, I can't remember the name of it now, but a beautiful book, a printing operation. And Chogyam Trungpa, who's Shambhala, you've probably heard Shambhala, and then Lama Yeshe. And Lama Yeshe's first centers were Chenrezig, Manjushri, Vajrapani, and Lama Tsongkhapa in Italy. So all of these are on your bucket list. So one time we were in England, and Sogyal Rinpoche, who was another big name in teaching Westerners, asked Lama Yeshe to come to his center so that the students could meet him. So Lama agreed, and he went right up front, and he sat on the ground like Keldon, like Venerable Keldon is, like these gentlemen are. And Sogyal Rinpoche is a big temple, it's a big meditation room, completely full. And now they start this little push-pull, because Sogyal Rinpoche wants Lama on the high throne, and Lama wants to stay right there on the ground. And Sogyal Rinpoche is pulling on him to get him on the high throne, and Lama's just getting smaller and smaller, trying to melt into the floor. And then finally, Sogyal Rinpoche won and put Lama on the high throne. And then Sogyal Rinpoche did this. Sogyal Rinpoche paced back and forth in this Gompa, and he addressed all of his Western students. And he said that for them to be able to have Dharma at all was because of Lama Yeshe. Amazing for a Lama of the stature of Sogyal Rinpoche. And then he said, and Lama Yeshe brought Buddhism to the West, and he put Chenrezig in Australia, he put Manjushri in England, he put Vajrapani in America, and with all his wisdom, he put Lama Tsongkhapa with the Pope in Italy. It was really sweet, and it was really quite an accolade. Okay, so does that give you kind of like the cliff notes of how the FPMT started? And then more centers were developing as more people, those were the initial centers. But as people came back into the Nordic countries, into Spain, etc., more centers were being established. And then I ended up back here in 1986, pregnant. The father said he was very sorry, but he didn't want it to interfere with his personal life. Take it easy, baby. Gave me $100 and said I was on my own. So that was a little bit difficult. I'd been gone from the country for 8 years. I didn't speak English very well anymore because when you live at the monastery where they don't speak English, you have to learn how to shake your head and have a few choice words just to get by. So my English was convoluted, and I was asking for the toilet, not the bathroom, because you don't ask for a bathroom in India and Nepal. You ask for a toilet because you don't want a bath. You just want a toilet. So I was going because had to pee a lot. Wherever I went, I'd ask for the toilet. My sister was just she was just aghast that I was asking for the toilet, and I should have been asking for the bathroom or the powder room. I was asking for the toilet, and I didn't have. I had been I'd been renewing my driver's license all those years, but I was sending a check that was a bank was in England. So when they got my check, they just ripped it up. So I didn't have a driver's license. I couldn't find my social security card. Somebody gave me a bike, so I was biking around Boca Raton pregnant. It was just really a ridiculous situation. But I had to face it because I wasn't going to have an abortion and I wasn't going to give the child away. My parents already had something set up so that I could give the child to these people that were like head honchos with McDonald's. And I said, oh my goodness gracious, I can't let this child be raised by the CEO of McDonald's. So, I mean, it was apparent that I was keeping the child, but it was not easy at all. It was really difficult. And fortunately, I had beautiful, beautiful, beautiful dreams, and they really are the reason that I was able to stay calm. I actually stayed calm, concerned, but calm. And I was with my sister, and she lived in a townhouse. And the lady that was next door, did I tell this before? She was 2 weeks more pregnant than I was. So she was a mess. She had everything. She had a car, she had a house, she had a room for the baby, she had a mother who was helping, she had a job, she had money, she had everything. She had a bank account. I didn't have any of those things. And she was nuts. And I was somehow okay. And then when the babies were born, her baby was born on December 11th and mine was born on December 25th. Her baby was crying all the time and he was stiff and it was a real challenge for her. Whereas my baby was born with a birth defect, actually, but she was so soft and she was so peaceful and she didn't ever complain about anything. That's not now. That was then. But
Listening to this.
but Bobby said to me, the lady, she said, it has to be the meditation. So would you please teach meditation at the Jewish Community Center, which is where she worked? So I mean, literally, this is not a joke. So this is in June, or it must have been the spring. She asked me to teach meditation. And I told Keldon, I actually turned around to see who she was talking to because I wasn't me. I couldn't teach anybody anything. And then I had to think, I thought, I may be the closest that anybody gets to a Buddha. So if I don't accept her request, then that's wrong. It's just wrong. So that was the very beginning of Thubten Kunga Center. I didn't know what was coming from it. I was just accepting invitations to go wherever anybody asked. And I was kept completely busy with invitations. And a lot of the classes were held in personal homes. And then one lady one day, this is an interesting story. This lady was from my class at the Jewish Community Center because the classes at the Jewish Community Center were seasonal. So when it came to be the summer, all the snowbirds went up north, so they didn't hold any classes at the Jewish Community Center. So this one lady said, well, we can't have that. So she's the one who started things in the home. This lady had suffered an aneurysm and she was in a coma for 3 months. And when she came out of the coma, she was missing half her head because they had to do brain surgery. She had half her head missing, and she was in trauma. She couldn't sit still. She couldn't see a hospital. If she saw a hospital, she'd go into a panic attack. She couldn't fly.
She couldn't drive. And by the time she finished in my classes, she would sit for the whole time, and she was getting on an airplane to go see relatives. Amazing transformation in this woman just from my silly meditations. So she put me in the car one day and drove me to Palm Beach State College. And she took me to this lady. She sat me down in front of this lady and said, this lady needs to teach at the college. So now I'm working at the college. And they had me design courses. I designed like 13 different courses for them, all using the Dharma. It was really, I mean, I have to say it was really amazing, but I didn't have competition. So that made it easier because there was nobody else. There was nobody else with my show. So, yeah. So, and there was one woman, I have to tell you, when she walked into the room, I happen to have had the opportunity to speak to large crowds before, really large crowds. I don't get frightened. This one woman walked into the classroom, and I thought, what am I going to do? This woman, you know, a Shar-Pei, you know, a dog, the Shar-Pei, it's like wrinkle after wrinkle. After, this lady competed with the Shar-Pei. She was just nothing but wrinkles. And she scared me to death because how could I help this lady who already came in looking combative? She was amazing. She's became one of the hostesses, and we would have meditation classes in her house. And her husband of 50 years would sit in the back. This is the thing, it was mainly women, and the men would tag along. So they were getting some kind of benefit as well. And then her husband died. And she called me. She was at the hospital, and he had died. And she called me. This is amazing. This is a lady that I couldn't, it scared me to death. And she called me from the hospital. Her husband of 50 years had died. And she said, I'm just calling to tell you, I'm going to make you a promise. I am not going to pour me. I am not going to pour me. So, I mean, even if you had a toothache for 50 years, you'd miss it if it was gone. But this was her husband of 50 years, and she made a pledge not to feel sorry for herself. I find that absolutely incredibly amazing. And when she had her 90th birthday, the kids came down and they had a room at a restaurant that you need to go to. It's on the ocean. It's really beautiful. And I don't remember what it's called now, but it's not like in Highland Beach. Used to be a Holiday Inn. It's really beautiful. Yeah. So they had a private room there. And I arrived at the party. They invited me to the party, and I was the guest of honor. And they had like this bouquet of flowers that was amazing. And they said why. It was her 90th birthday party, but I was the guest of honor because they said they wouldn't have a party for her if she hadn't met me, because the family was in diaspora. The family was in, they didn't talk to each other. They didn't see each other. And now, and this is the other thing that happened. She had no more wrinkles. She looked like she'd had a facelift. She said she couldn't believe it when she looked in the mirror because she looked so differently, and her family was whole. Amazing. So this was the beginning of Thubten Kunga Center, these groups that were happening. And then my mom had this really deep wish for me to appear normal. So I had a little townhouse that I was living in. I had no furniture, but I decided that I was going to, and I actually had a job at that point. And I was going to make my mom happy because she was dying. She had pancreatic cancer. So I got proper furniture in the house, and I needed some like tchotchkes, you know, like things in the house. So I ended up picking up this statue. It's funny, I was at one of the department stores in Nordstrom's at the mall, and I was going up the escalator, and there was a statue like looking at me from here. I said, I'll take that. I didn't even know it was Kuan Yin until I got it home. I'll take that. But that was at another shop one day looking for things to put in this house so my mom would be comfortable that I was okay. And I heard this guy who was talking about he was going on a tour to India, and the tour was all mapped out of where they were going, but he didn't know what he would do with his time in Delhi. I just gotten back from Delhi. So I went up to him. I said, well, if you don't mind my saying so, I can give you some people to meet and some places to go. Well, he was the husband of Maggie Alarcon, who became the benefactor of the center and paid the rent for 16 years. They divorced. It was a terrible breakup. But he took me home. I met Maggie. They both got involved with the Dharma. They both went to Kopan, and then they had a separation. But Maggie stayed on. And when I had to leave, Maggie stayed the director for 16 years and paid for everything out of her pocket. So that's the beginning of Thubten Kunga Center. Did that make sense? And that's all because this fellow got me pregnant and said, take it easy, baby, and sent me home to my parents. And my parents said, you don't get off the plane until you hit Boca Raton. And I arrived and had to deal with a very difficult situation. And somehow or other, I handled it well enough to be asked to start teaching meditation. And from there, it just sort of grew. So there was, and I was really proud that there were all these students. I was so happy that there were all these students. So Lama Zopa was going to teach in Virginia. And I've tried to get the people at Guya Samaja Center to help me with the timeline, but the director who's just retired doesn't know the history. And so he couldn't help me. And the previous director's on vacation. He said he'll try to help me. But they had this a teaching with Lama Zopa in a church in Virginia. So all of these students that had come along went up to this teaching with Lama Zopa, and they filled half the church. There was the aisle down to the altar, and the whole side, the right-hand side, were all our students. So when Lama Zopa arrived, I said, Lama Zopa, here are your students. And he ripped off a piece of paper about this big, and it was given to me after the talk. And the little piece of paper said, the name of your center is Thubten Kunga Ling. May you bring bright enlightenment happiness to all sentient beings. And I was just dumbfounded because I thought I was turning the students over to Lama Zopa. And he said, the name of your center is.
Got it.
So that was the beginning of the formal process of becoming Thubten Kunga Center. Where I incorporated the center, and we had a beautiful facility. Was anybody around back then? No. Palm Plaza. I drove you through it. It looks really derelictical now, but we had a beautiful place there, and we've had several places. And it's all due to the kindness of all these people that have helped the center over all these years. Amazing. I mean, the center couldn't be if it weren't for the people that had their lives changed by the Dharma and don't want to live in a land where there's no Dharma. They don't want to live in a place where they can't come like we do and have people of the caliber of Venerable Keldon share with us the treasure of the Dharma. So that's the history of Thubten Kunga Center in a nutshell. It's pretty good, right? So that's why, for me personally, it's really important that the history of Lama Zopa is captured, because Lama Zopa, I mean, we could take a picture of Lama Zopa and say, this is Lama Zopa. But what Lama Zopa is all the people whose lives he's transformed. And you're part of that. Even though you didn't get to meet Lama Zopa. Did you meet Lama Zopa? Yeah, good. Okay. So were you did you ever meet Lama Zopa? No. Okay, so but that's why it's important, because, and then I wanted to spring on something Bob asked last time, because I said that I'd been looking, and I saw these devotees of the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi at an airport, and they were all dressed in white, and they had flowers, and they were prostrating, and that had impacted me, and I wanted to know more about that. And he asked why I didn't follow with that group, but it didn't click. There was something there that sparked something in me to keep looking. But that wasn't it. It didn't match. But when I heard the Dharma and you hear the Lam Rim, I mean, life makes sense. It doesn't make sense without the Lam Rim. I mean, Albert Camus said, I was a real fan of Albert Camus. He said the biggest decision a human being makes is not to kill themselves. I mean, I tried when I was young. I was going to cut my wrists in the bathtub, and then I could see it was going to be real messy, so I didn't do that. But I used to sew, so I ran the needle over my finger because you've got to have a reason to not kill yourself. Basically, I mean, it has to make sense. And the Dharma, when you hear the Lam, at least in my case, you hear the Lam Rim, and everything opens up. And it all makes sense. And you hear about bodhicitta. Now your life has a meaning and direction. It's like so profound. So no, I got off track on that. I'll see if I can find my way back.
You tell a little bit about when Lama was passing away and what happened, like as a community, as FPMT, as Rinpoche.
I can do that. I just want to get back to where I was because now I remember. So thank you. So Rinpoche had given the name to the center, Thubten Kunga Ling. May you bring bright. This is our mission. May you bring bright enlightenment, happiness to all sentient beings. That's a pretty beautiful name, to have that as your goal. So now Rinpoche, we're on Rinpoche's radar, and Rinpoche agreed to come here and teach. So it was the most amazing event that we had. Unbelievable. We were stymied. Where are we going? I mean, things are not cheap in Boca Raton. It's a very expensive place. Even then, I mean, now it's unapproachable, but then it was.
What year are you talking about?
I don't know. I need help putting that together. I have pictures of Felicity at that age. So I would say she's about 10 in the pictures. I would say, and she was born in 1986. So 1996, 1997, something along there. And so we were stymied. Where were we going to hold this? Where was he going to stay? And we just happened to go to the Holiday Inn, which is now the farmer's table, farm to table in on how on by the by the
Military Glades.
it's where
Military and Glades.
exactly, yeah, exactly that one. It was a Holiday Inn then, and that room that was is the restaurant. That room had nothing in it. It was empty. It hadn't been developed, and even the roof was leaking, and it had no carpet on the floor. And we said, "Can we have it? And we'll put people in your hotel. We'll bring people. We'll give you people in your hotel. We'll cater. We'll get our food from you. Can we have that room?" So they gave us this room, which is now a restaurant. We had to put buckets because it rained. We had to put buckets. And people flew in for this course. It was unbelievable. You have to go eat at that restaurant because where the bar is, that was the altar. That's where Rinpoche sat. It's like totally, I walked into it one day having dinner or lunch with somebody, and it was like going back to Kopan and saying, I know where I am, but I don't know where I am. So this room was our Gompa, and Rinpoche sat on this altar, on this throne, and now it's a bar. And that's where Anthony got married. Yeah, yeah, it's so cool. I was able to, we went out to lunch once and Anthony was there with his wife. Were you there?
Was at lunch, not at his marriage.
No, but you were at the lunch with
Lunch, I was
Yangtze Rinpoche. Were you there?
Yes, but
Oh, I know which ones you were at. That was at the Runch
Pembo called and
Pendrin.
at Hendron was there.
Yeah. This was a different lunch.
Yeah.
But and then Anthony announced and his wife announced, this is where we're getting married. It was so kind of nice, that all sort of fits together like that. But now can you imagine getting a free room in Boca Raton? My God. So Rinpoche came and that was like totally amazing. That really helped put the center together because we've gotten a name. We had so much enthusiasm. People were it was really cohesive. It was really quite astounding. So, yeah, I think that's it. I think that's the history of Thubten Kunga Center from, my pregnancy to here we are now that my daughter's 37. Amazing. So you asked about Lama's passing away. Well, so Lama Yeshe had a parachute. Lama Yeshe had an expression. I don't know if many people heard it. I was talking to a girl, a lady from my generation, and she'd never heard Lama say this. Lama said, "My students keep me alive, and my students will kill me." And Lama was very ill. Every 6 months, he'd go to the doctors and they'd do a check on how he was. He had had not scarlet fever, not whooping cough, one of the diseases like that we don't really get too much anymore. No,
This was a Rinpoche.
Pneumonia?
not pneumonia. No, I had scarlet fever, so it's not scarlet fever, and it wasn't whooping cough. No, but it hurt his heart, the disease that he had as a child. And I think 2 of the valves or 3 of the valves were open. And so I went with Lama once in Italy to see the doctor. And the doctor came out to talk to me after the exam. And this is what the doctor said. The doctor said, "He has a very big heart." I almost couldn't hold back from laughing.
Tell me about it.
But the fact was he had a very big heart. And that because it wasn't able to pump correctly, it was petrifying. And because it was becoming hard, it was dislocating all of the organs. And every doctor Lama would see would give him a maximum of 6 months to live. A maximum of every time, a maximum of 6 months. But because of the harmony in the organization, because of the growth in the organization, Lama was okay. He had multiple heart attacks, not just one big one, but he would have little heart attacks. We were waiting for Lama in Italy once, and Lama didn't show up. So we got in touch with the lady in India, and Lama had a heart attack, and he wasn't able to fly. And then finally he was able to fly, and we greeted him in Italy, and Lama had a little villetta at Lama Tsongkhapa Institute, and Lama went into his villetta, and the heat was cranked up to the highest it could be. The windows were closed. They were completely put curtains down. It was a very scary time. I said Lama was incubating. It was like Lama was incubating because he was just stayed alone in this warm little villetta and healed himself. And when the windows started to open up, the curtains went up and the windows were opened up and the door was opened up and the fresh air was in, Lama had healed himself. So life went on. But then there was, you probably have heard this in the Dharma and the Lam Rim about the importance of the student. I mean, the guru doesn't appear if there's no students. The Lama, the teacher appears when the cause is created. Well, there happened to have been some disharmony in the center in England, the big center in England, and Lama took the aspect of being very ill, and Lama went to California, and they had consulted with the high lamas. Should Lama Yeshe go to the hospital or should we take care of Lama Yeshe? And the divination came out that Lama Yeshe should be in the hospital, but he was very ill. But he'd been very ill. But this thing about disharmony is really important to understand, that we are special. All of us are special to each other. You have your normal physical family, but we're a different family. We're a Vajra family. We're a family that's bound not by blood, but by an understanding and an appreciation and a wish to benefit others. And how the only way, I mean, I say that I got tricked into being a Buddhist because I didn't want to be a Buddhist. I didn't want to sign on any dotted line and have an ism in my life. But what I wanted to do, what I really wanted to do, was to be able to help universally and not harm. And then you realize the only way you can do that is through the Dharma. Everything else is fine, good and dandy. But the path that can take you to that point where you can help others, even by just breathing, you are help. The only thing that can do that is the Buddha Dharma. So it's really important when you're sisters and brothers in this, that you remain harmonious and you don't have fights. You don't separate. You stay together because it's important for the guru to be there. But there was some disharmony. It was very serious disharmony at this one center. And that's when I call it the parachute, because now Lama had said his students would kill him. And that's basically what happened. And Lama was in the hospital, and the divinations came that all extraordinary measures should go into effect to try to save Lama's life, because Lama was so important. But the physicalness wasn't there for it. The physicalness wasn't there, and then there was this disharmony that was a terrible echo in the background of everything. And Lama took the aspect of passing away. There is a letter that Lama wrote. I don't know where I have a copy of it, but Lama had a buddy named Geshe Jampa Wangdu, who was a really a high meditator, really renowned for his skills. He lived up above Dharamsala. And were they going to Dharamsala? Taking everybody to, you all go to Dharamsala with Keldon. And this was Lama's buddy. It was so cute, like you have a best friend. And so Geshe Jampa Wangdu was Lama's good friend, best friend, buddy. So while he was in the hospital, Lama wrote a really long letter to Geshe Jampa Wangdu telling him about the experience of being in the hospital with tubes. Because in Tibet, if you're going to die, you're not in a hospital with tubes and, things that are pressing on you and monitors going and injections happening. That doesn't happen in Tibet. So Lama was writing the story out to Geshe Jampa Wangdu and about the bland food and the whole journey. We should find it. Do you have access to it?
Lama Yeshe was an archive there.
Yeah, it's nice for people to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe we can find it. But Lama took the aspect of passing away, and what happened was that helped the disharmony calm down. Should I explain the disharmony? No, it was very serious, and it actually could have affected the Dalai Lama. So Lama was like the focus of this disharmony. It was aimed at Lama, but it could have affected His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So that there's this expression that that you can die for your teacher. You can take it on so that they don't have to experience some kind of obstacle in their life. That's what Lama did. I mean, in his wisdom, in order for the Dharma to propagate without this severe disharmony, Lama just took the parachute, opened the parachute, and took the aspect of passing away. But while he'd been in the hospital, he made friends with all of the physicians, because it's extraordinary. I mean, Lama was a Buddha, and there he was. And you don't have to be told he's a Buddha. There's just something about being with Lama Yeshe that your heart is touched. Amazing. So they allowed Lama to stay in rest in the hospital for as long as they could allow it. It's not something they do in the hospital. When you're pronounced dead, everybody's out of the room, and then you're put in an ice box or whatever. But they let Lama stay for as long as they could. And during that time, the signs of Lama's consciousness leaving the body were seen. So
Did that when you did
well, when you die, Lama Zopa has said that if you're a family, the way you make a family worthwhile is for one person to know how to die. Because dying is a really critical time in your stream of consciousness. When you leave your body, you understand that there's a mind, and the mind is not the body. It resides in the body. This is good because this is good food for thought. The mind is what travels on. The body doesn't travel on. Eventually, the body will go back to dust. It'll be burned. It'll be put in the ground, and you won't recognize the body. It'll just turn into dust. And they say ashes to ashes, dust to dust, something like that. So that's what happened. But there's a mind that lives right here when you're peaceful. There's a mind, it's formless, all-knowing, clear light that leaves the body at the time of death. And you want the best way. This is why you can be a family that helps each other. Is he brought me some seeds from what was the mandala? Is it Kala Chakra mandala? Or a medicine book? He brought me some sand from it, and I was saying that you can put that sand on the crown chakra of the party that's dying. You can even use something like honey so that it sticks there. And when the party is dead, they're declared dead, you can pull there. And that helps the consciousness leave the body. And that's what we want.
when my cat passed away, you did something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when my mom died, I just happened to have left the room. I stayed with my mom through the whole process. And I had the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and I was able to follow everything. Everything written in the Tibetan Book of the Dead was exactly what was happening with my mother, but not in the same language, because they didn't have the language that the doctors have now. So, but it was really astounding to follow it. But I had told my sister that if my mom were to pass away, she had to keep everybody from her body. The first thing people want to do is hold and touch the body. You don't want to do that. Keep people away from the body, and then you pull here, and that'll draw the consciousness out. So my sister said, she said that she did that. She kept my mom and my dad and my brother off the body, and she pulled the top of her head, the hair, and she said that she felt as a daughter that she had done the last best thing a daughter could do for her mother. I helped my father's girlfriend died before my father, and the son, who was he was like the caretaker for my mother, for my father and his girlfriend, and she had a massive stroke and she was in the ICU. And John called me and asked me if I could please come and help, because here's the ICU, right? This woman's completely out of it. She's like tubes and things going on everywhere, beeps, and the family comes in, and they don't even pay any attention to her. They're just gossiping the whole time while she's lying there near death. And the first thing I did was clear the room. I said, please, if you have to talk, you go into the hallway, and you stay out there if you're going to talk, and you don't come back in here until you're quiet and peaceful and appreciate what's going on with your mother. And I left John with, and he stayed with her until she died. And I left her with mantras, and he put them on all, we had them on all her chakras, and some sand, yeah, sand from like the Kala chakra mandala. And he stayed with her the whole time. And I said that the mantra was to stay on her, not to be taken off. And he said exactly the same thing when his mom passed away. Exactly the same words. He said he felt that he had done the last best thing a son could do for his mother.
And what do you call that claw that goes over?
The yellow one, the
Yeah,
healing
that's-
cloth.
She's talking about the liberation
Yeah,
blanket.
Yeah. Yeah.
What word is?
Well, that's new. That's something Rinpoche's just developed. But that's, I have to say, we could make a big business out of that. Because when I was in the hospital, I had one with me, and everybody wanted one. I mean, it doesn't matter what religion you are. If you think something's going to help you, you want it. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And I did that, with my cat. My cat died on July 4th, and we put her in the bathtub because we could. And we wanted to see if any signs happened. And I put a stupa on her head, and I put uh, the what are they? Like the yeah, I put whatever they are that come in the death kit. I had those on the cat.
She put the stupor on the cat's head too. Yeah. There's a string too. There's.
Well, this cat, she her consciousness left the body on July 6th, His Holiness's birthday. It came out her nose. Yeah. And I did Dorji Khandra with her body. Amazing, right? And after that, I did it outside. And after that, a notice went out in the community that there were not to be any more barbecues. A cat takes a long time to burn. Oh, so what they did, the Vajrapani community is really special, very, very special. I mean, they are a true family. And was it Tom Wagner who drove Lama in his pickup truck? They let Lama go back up to he was in Los Angeles, and they let Lama go back up to Santa Cruz to Vajrapani Institute to be burned on the land. They got all the permissions. It just had to be the time, for these things, because now there's too many rules and laws and everybody's watching you. But he drove with Lama in the back of this pickup truck all the way back up to Santa Cruz. And now all the high lamas had flown in. Song Rinpoche flew in, and Lama Zopa, of course, was there. And they had people who knew what they were doing, and they built a funeral pyre. And Lama Yeshe was actually cremated in this funeral pyre on the land at Vajrapani. So when you go there, which is on your next trip, you can go to see the stupa that's there, which is where Lama was cremated. Actually, Osel says he has a very hard time going there. So is that what you wanted? Probably I told more, but did I hit the main points?
Yes, if you can say a little bit how it evolved after that,
How what evolved?
like that 50.
Without Lama? Well, this is really important what Venerable Keldam is saying. So during this whole time that Lama Zopa was with Lama Yeshe, it was like, sometimes I think I must sound disrespectful, but I'm not being disrespectful. Rinpoche Lama was the one that would come in and relieve the tension, because Rinpoche would teach, he would teach for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, and you're like really falling asleep and entertaining some pretty negative thoughts because this happened because Rinpoche was so sincere. It wasn't because he was trying to torture you. It was because he wanted you to know all this information, and he really liked to talk about the hell realms. And so people would get like really kind of edgy, and then Lama would come in and just make everybody laugh because that's Lama's style. And he'd make you laugh after you've been so serious. Then Lama would come in and take the pressure off by making you laugh. Still doing the Dharma, but a completely different presentation style, completely different. So, but Lama was always the student under Lama Yeshe, always the student. In fact, when I would write the letters for Lama Zopa, I wasn't allowed to take the letters into Rinpoche to give a response. I would have a stack of letters, people with questions, and I'd want to have Rinpoche answer the letters. And Lama said no, that Rinpoche had more important things to do. And those more important things to do were his studies. And I was a little not so happy that I couldn't get to Rinpoche. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to sneak up there and I'm going to take those letters and I'm going to get through. Don't you know that when I got up to Rinpoche's room, Lama's standing like this with his hand on the door frame waiting for me. And he said, you can answer the letters. You know what to say. Because Rinpoche was in this, this studies that he needed to do. And I'll just tell you a little story about that. So Rinpoche had many, many letters to answer. And now there's a book called Dear Lama Zopa, I think, Dear Lama Zopa, because so many of the questions were the same. I mean, one person wrote in, he says, I hear there's going to be turmoil in Africa. Should I still come? And Rinpoche said, there's turmoil somewhere all the time. Just take precautions and do what you need to do, but do what you need to do. I mean, they're kind of questions like that people would ask. So the one question happened to have been a very good question, and it required a very extensive answer. So Rinpoche would dictate to me, and I'd write it down, and then I'd go down to my house and I'd type it, and then I'd bring it back for Rinpoche, and I'd read to him what I typed, and it was not right at all. I had not gotten what Rinpoche was saying. So Rinpoche would give me the corrections. I'd go down to my house, I'd type it, I'd bring it back, I'd show Rinpoche, and it still wasn't right. So now we've got this letter, and I wasn't a typist. We've got this letter with these red marks all over it and the stuff in the corners and Rinpoche writing. And he said, that's good. You can send it like that. I said, Rinpoche, no, I really want to do this right. So I went down, I typed it up, I brought it back. But guess what happened? This is amazing to me personally. I got the teaching.
Oh,
I got it.
wow.
So now I could type it, but I couldn't type it until I got it. That was like blew my mind. And now the letter was perfect and it could go. But those things happened with Rinpoche. But still, Rinpoche was he was subservient to Lama Yeshe. Lama Yeshe was the main act, and Lama Zopa was the guy talking about death. And then when Lama Yeshe passed away, Rinpoche became a miracle in action. Because even though he'd been so very in the background of the operation of the FPMT, and he'd been kept by Lama doing his studies and his retreats. So this is also another interesting thing, that once a year, Rinpoche was totally scripted on what he had to do, what retreats he had to do, what teachings he had to have, what teachers he had to have them from. It was all laid out. Once a year, Lama gave Lama Zopa the option to choose any teacher from any teacher. Do you know what he chose? Lam Rim. Every time. It shows the importance of Lam Rim. The Lam Rim is our life's blood. We need to study the Lam Rim. And it's not just like any old book that you read. You read and you meditate on it. Like Venerable Keldon's been doing the 365 days. That's amazing. Amazing. Yeah. So, but what happened when Lama was gone was Rinpoche became the czar. He didn't hesitate for a minute. And he led the FPMT. And why? Because of his love of Lama, because of his devotion to Lama, because Lama was such a miracle in the world. Rinpoche didn't let anything drop. And he gave his whole life to the FPMT. and it grew beyond anyone's imagination. They used to take donations to for Sarah Monastery in South India because Rinpoche took on the pledge of feeding the 3,000, is it, monks? Feeding them. He got enough money so there's investment so that they can eat with wise management of the money. Isn't that amazing? I mean, I can't do that for myself, let alone for 3,000 monks. You know, that's like amazing. And then Kopan has grown, and then Rinpoche had statues made, and 300 statues for His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and you could sponsor them, and they would be offered to His Holiness. I mean, Rinpoche worked tirelessly, and Rinpoche didn't sleep. And so now he's working tirelessly with his own studies and with all this work. Amazing, amazing. I mean, just something to add to that because it's just astounding what Rinpoche did, beyond superhuman, what Rinpoche did.
You say you didn't sleep at all, you mean that literally?
Yeah.
Didn't sleep at all?
Yeah.
How
He
long?
might have, like I mentioned the one time when I took tea in the middle of the night. I took tea Rinpoche and I took Rinpoche tea. And Rinpoche had been sitting on his a full lotus on his bed, and he'd fallen backwards, and even his legs went up. And then I walked in the room, and he just came right forward. So he kind of snoozed, but never asleep ever. And you know why? Because I asked Rinpoche about that, and he says, because I don't have enough time to do everything that needs to be done. Because there would be the things that Rinpoche would do during the day that were the forward facing acts, you know, working with the centers, doing this, doing that on the outward. And at night, Rinpoche had he had to pray for everybody who asked him. You asked to be prayed for, Rinpoche prayed for you. Didn't meet a heartbeat. He was Felicity's like protector her whole life. Felicity didn't do anything without Rinpoche's guidance. He said that she should model. So she, as a young girl, was modeling. And she's not a model, but she got so much composure from that. You know, there were a lot of things that came from that. Rinpoche told her to be the director of Miller Rapist Center. I mean, when everybody was suffering so much from the loss of Lama Zopa, and everybody was saying, well, I was with Rinpoche so many years. And people were saying 30 years, 50 years. And Felicity said, my whole life. There wasn't a moment in her life that Rinpoche wasn't there. So Rinpoche is like a miracle man. Nothing, if you don't have a bodhicitta, if you don't have bodhicitta, you can't, and I don't mean bodhicitta like I have bodhicitta. I am motivated to help others, but I get enough sleep. You know, imagine that not 1 second of the day are you doing anything but thinking of others. So I'll tell you a couple of funny stories. Was that okay? So we were in England once, and you've all been to England. It's so dreary. It's so cold. The buildings are so old. They don't have proper heat. It's just miserable. And we were in the Rinpoche was talking in some hall, some enormous, drafty, old hall. And Rinpoche was up on what do you call this? Like a raised area, like a platform stage. Thank you. And that's where Rinpoche was talking. And Rinpoche used to have a cough. And it was quite distracting because Rinpoche was always coughing. And Lama Yeshe used to say, Kusho, stop coughing. And then for a minute, he wouldn't cough, but then he'd be back to coughing. I don't know. The cough cleared up after Rinpoche had his stroke. But it was actually really hard in this cold, drafty English building with Rinpoche talking about stuff that was way not communicating with the people. and he was coughing through it all. And the people they couldn't get out of the room fast enough. They were just exiting like somebody said fire. And there were just a few people left in the whole audience, just a few, like really literally. It was really, I was really sorry, but that's just the way it was. And there were two little old ladies. I say little old ladies, they were probably my age, but they were sitting in the front. And one had I remember this, one had very long, thin gray hair. And she'd wrapped it on top of her head like this, and she had two chopsticks in it. And that's what held it up. So they were sitting right up front, and everybody else had left, and just spotty people. So now the fellow who was our host put us in his Jaguar, and he wants to show us sights. Rinpoche has no interest in sightseeing. He said, because this guy, he couldn't hear what Rinpoche was saying. Rinpoche said, if I want to see something, I'll get a postcard. But this guy really, really, really wanted to take Rinpoche on a sightseeing tour of London in the dark, in the rain. So we went down whatever that road is that goes right to the palace, I guess, and the lights can go flat, and then you can have airplanes. It can be a landing strip. So we got to see that, and then we got down to the roundabout, and there's a statue. Now Rinpoche is totally engrossed in his own world, and Sean is up front talking, and pointing out all of everything that was happening in London, and Rinpoche's just completely in his own world. And now there's this roundabout, and we go around it, and Rinpoche goes, "Who was that lady?" And he's talking about the two ladies in the front with the chopsticks in the hair. Who was that lady? And there was a statue in this roundabout of Queen Victoria. And Sean said, it's Queen Victoria. And Rinpoche goes, really? So now we had to go around the statue so many times because Rinpoche's in his own world and Sean's in his own world, and they were like, I'm sorry, I just couldn't help but laughing, but I couldn't laugh. Because the other thing is Queen Victoria is considered to be an incarnation of a very important deity in Tibetan Buddhism. So she's not just any old ordinary person. Yeah. And so Rinpoche thinks that Pelted Lama was in the front. So I never ever told either one of them.
Let it be.
Yeah. It was totally priceless.
And the lady didn't know that.
And the lady didn't know that. Rinpoche, really? Okay, so I actually had things. One thing I wanted to. I remember my story about the helicopter, and how so many ironic things happened. That nobody was giving me direction what to do, and then I decided I had to get a helicopter, and there was only one helicopter left, and it was going to go offline in a week, and I had to get 10,000 or 1,000 or whatever dollars, and then if it rained, we couldn't go, but I still lost my money. And if we went up and we didn't make our destination, I lost my money and we wouldn't get Rinpoche. And all of these things happened. And then finally at the end, they want to see my trucking pass, my trucking visa. And I didn't think I had a trucking visa, but I had a trucking visa. And then
that gal that it was the last day, right?
Yeah. And so now we get up to Laudo, and I told Rinpoche, I've come to get you. And Rinpoche said, you didn't get my note? And I think I'm crazy. I really think I'm crazy. Did I get a note? I didn't get a note. And now I'm saying, so Rinpoche, you don't have to come. He said, I sent you a letter. I told you I'm not coming back. Okay, it's okay, Rinpoche, you don't have to come back. I'm going to go home and waitress. And I'm doing prostrations, and he's doing mows, and he finally decides he's going to go. Come with us. He comes with us. And I find out that the boy who was carrying the message that he wasn't coming down arrived just after we took off into the air. Can you imagine? If I'd gotten that message while I was on land, don't know what I would have done. But I didn't get the message. Lama Pasang got it. Amazing.
That's just the way it was supposed to.
It worked out good. And even Lama Zopa doesn't know that Lama Yeshe didn't tell me to do all that. But I didn't. Lama didn't. And I got a letter from Lama later congratulating me on taking the initiative to do that. It could have been a real blunder, but it worked out okay. Okay, so now we're at the end, even though I actually made a list.
Was it
Oh, yeah.
tuberculosis?
No.
That's okay.
It's something like in the range of scarlet fever.
Scarlet.
No, it wasn't scarlet fever. I had scarlet fever. It was something like that. And I don't think it was whooping cough. But I just want to tell you one funny story. So,
Rheumatic fever?
yes, that's what it was. It damaged the heart. And that was the parachute. So this is just really quick. So we were,
I was gonna say, can we do this again next Friday night? Is that possible? No, okay, all right. Forget it then.
but this is a really good story. So, actually I have a couple of really good stories, but we were in a hotel in Delhi. I miss a lot of my memory has a lot of holes in it, but we were in a hotel in Delhi and I was with Lama Zopa and in walks this fellow with a lungi. You know what a lungi is? It's a loincloth. It's what the Indians wear. It's a lungi, but it's a loincloth. It's a piece of muslin that's wrapped around your lower body. And he has a staff and he has nothing on his top. And he's in this hotel in India because this is what the mendicants, the beggars, they're not beggars. They're not beggars like poor people on the street begging like this. These are like kind of yogi kind of people. They have a staff and they wear just a lungi and they walk to places where they're going. And this is one of the older students of Lama and Rinpoche. His name was John Schwartz. He was in the movie industry in the John Wayne era. And he was very good friends with John Wayne's son. So he's been around for quite a while and he comes to see Rinpoche in the hotel and he's wearing a lungi. He's got the staff and he announces to Lama Zopa that he's going to Goa. You know what Goa is? Goa is where all the people go to have fun. Yeah, it's sun in the sun. And I've never been there, but that's where a lot of yeah. And so John is going with his lungi and his staff. He's going to Goa. And Lama Zopa says, why? And John says, because I've never been there. And Rinpoche says, well, just because you don't remember going to the hell realms, do you want to go there too?
Oh, my goodness.
That's kind of funny, right? Yeah. Okay. So I had another John Schwartz, but I'll leave it there at 8:30. Any last minute questions? So I have, thanks to my friend Luke, who's on the screen. He's a master at making bookmarks, and he's in Mexico, and he sent me 5 envelopes over the time. It's marked envelope 1, envelope 2, envelope 3. He makes bookmarks. So I brought them, and you're welcome to take a bookmark or 2. And if you got a bookmark and you want another bookmark, you're welcome to take them. And that's all compliments of Luke on the screen there. Yeah.
Thank you, Luke.
Oh, look, there's his bookmarks. And they're getting more profound. They're getting more, like what was the one that I read today about? Do you love bacon so much you'd like to be it? Yeah. Yeah, I think Rinpoche has influence on Luke. Okay, any last minute questions? Well, it's really nice to get together like this. So we kind of get off track a little bit, but yeah. And so will you be able to pull this all together so we can send it to Osa? And I'd like my daughter to have a copy so she can use it in my funeral.
We hope to use it before that.
No, but I mean for one doesn't know. Can we do the swift return for Lama Zopa?
That's we can.
I don't have a book, but you're welcome. I'll pray with you while you read it out loud.
Would you like to go?
That's okay.
Jackie, Ted Thomas said maybe it was Queen Victoria in the audience with the chopsticks in her hair.
Yes, that's right. What page?
234.
234. So, Rinpoche, as we understand it, has not taken rebirth yet. And so somebody asked me this question once, well, the 45 days have elapsed, but Lama Zopa is not bound by karma, not like us. Rinpoche is not. The Buddha appears when the conditions are there for the Buddha to appear. So, and the Buddha can take many different forms. They say 5, but there could be many more. There could be many more, but there's the mind, the speech, the body, the power, the activities. Yeah. But also they say that the Buddha can appear as a bridge. If you're in trouble and need a bridge, we read that in the prayers. So the Buddha can appear in lots of different ways, but for us, it is not known that Rinpoche's taken a rebirth. So we have to create the cause. If we don't create the cause, it won't happen. You don't get boiling water by putting a pan on the stove with no fire under it. Makes sense, right? So there's no cause for Rinpoche to be reborn if we don't create that cause. So getting together like this and talking Lama Zopa stories, and maybe you're even inspired, maybe you didn't know much about Lama Zopa before, but now you say, wow, I'd like to go to Vajrapani. I want to go on the pilgrimage with Keldon, Venerable Keldon next year. I want to do these things because it sounds pretty amazing to me. And then you can see the cliff notes of what I said tonight about Kopan, Dharamsala. I mean, each one of these places has an amazing story. Amazing. Just like here we are, this little tiny center that didn't get the property that we thought we were going to get last time we met. But again, the cause has to be created for us to find that property. And so that's what we're doing. And to take all of that energy now and to wish really hard, to pray really hard that Lama Zopa appears in a form that we can benefit from. One of the most heart-touching stories for me is the birth of Shakyamuni Buddha, where he was born as a prince into this kingdom. And this mendicant came from the caves to see this baby. And while he's looking at the baby, he bursts into tears. And the parents are very worried that there's a problem with the child. And the mendicant says, no. He says, this is my teacher, and I won't be around when he can teach. I'll be dead. I mean, that breaks my heart every time I think about it. So with that, we can say this prayer for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and for mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. So thank you very much, Chag Selo. And you saw there that it said Thubten Zopa, that's what's so nice about the Tibetan names, because Thubten is the doctrine of the teachings, and Zopa is patience. And Lama Zopa was an extraordinarily patient person. And what happens when you practice patience is you become beautiful. That is the karmic result of practicing patience, is that you're physically beautiful. And Rinpoche was indescribably beautiful. I mean, sometimes you could look at his face and just wonder how anything could be so amazingly beautiful. Had all the features of the Buddha, right? All the features of the Buddha. Unbelievable. What does Kelden mean?
Fortunate.
Fortunate. Yeah, the name Lama gave me is Jacie-2.
What does that mean?
Yeshe is wisdom, and Sultram is morality. And I thought to myself when Lama gave me that name, I mean, what a nice thing to aspire to.
Right.
Yeah, so that's when I don't say if, when you decide to take refuge, then you will get a name that has significance. I mean, Jackie doesn't mean anything. Nothing. I mean, it's dead wood or something. I don't know. Something not very virtuous. So please help yourself to this one says, I must have really liked this one. Do you love bacon enough to become it? Suffering is stopped from within one's own mind, not from outside. I love this one because this is my life. Samsara is full of unfinished business. My house is the cycle of constantly recurring problems. So please help yourself. Yeah.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you so much.
Goodbye, everybody. They're gone. Bye, Mary. Bye, Gompa.
Goodbye, Jack.